I did a video just a little bit ago about the Terra rebels and what they're trying to do to recover Luna Classic. I figured I would supplant that then with what's going on with Do Rug Pool, formerly known as Do Kwon, because there's a little bit more information coming out. In one of the past videos recorded, I said that it's going to be very difficult to pin this guy down because unfortunately he was very smart, covering his tracks, covering his ass, and moving things and doing all this shuffling. And he's presented himself as if he's this innocent, guy that just made a mistake. And he hasn't even really acknowledged he made a mistake. He just said that he was sorry that his creation caused so much pain, which we know it was not his creation. We know that decisions he made ultimately caused this business. There were things he said to do and things he coerced people to do. And then behind the scenes, he was ducking things like taxes and all this. So we know that there's more to this than what we see. We didn't know how much more because they were trying to track him down. They were having a hard time tracking him down. And now, fast forward, they're still doing digging. This is not one of those things that's going to go away in the night. They're trying to really track down everything that led up to this. And there were stories about him basically giving money to some girl and all sorts of crazy stuff. It's pretty bad. I had a bunch of people that said, how is it possible that this guy is able to do this? And how is it possible that he's not being brought up for justice? And what the heck's going on? Though Rug Pull, mind you, is still tweeting. He's still active on social media. So it's not like he's completely offline. Now, he's done less than what he did before, but he is, yes, still active, still doing a thing. And there was some stuff he had retweeted that gave a little bit of insight into some back things, but it felt like it might be Chewbacca defense in some way. I'm going to cover two parts of this now. In this coverage, and this is based on data that you can readily find yourself. I'm simply sharing the information in case you were not aware. So there's two things. One, this information that he retweeted. So I take that as him saying, look, it wasn't me. Look at the pretty, like a Chewbacca defense. I take that's how that is. And then what happened with this other organization that he is directly involved in. And the reason I think the timing lends itself to Chewbacca is because it all came out about the same time. First, let's go with what he retweeted. And it has to do with UST. And so that there were wallets, obviously in blockchain, you can trace to follow the money, follow what was going on, where was this coming from, where were things being sent, what was happening. And people had done analysis and they determined that Do Rug Pool had been sending money to this other girl. That then started other investigations. There were money that was sent for potentially evading taxes and all this other stuff around him and his wallets. And then later, and this was, I believe, either today or yesterday, he sent and retweeted this message that said, well, according to what this says, in South Korea, they were doing some analysis and they found that there's something going on with the lead Terra developer that triggered what happened to UST. Well, that's kind of weird because if you think about this wallet is a named wallet, and apparently OKX was called out in this, and what they found was that this wallet was an OKX owned wallet. Well, that's kind of weird. And so now they're still doing analysis. This is a developing story. They're still doing some digging to figure out what's really going on here. Initially, it was reported that this might belong to an individual. Later, they said, well, this should be part of an exchange, in this case, OKX. So the reason I'm calling out him potentially, saying this is a Chewbacca is because him retweeting, I take it as him saying, look, this wasn't me. Ain't got nothing to do with me. Look, they found it's not me. I didn't do this. That's my gut. I'm not making a statement for or on his behalf. I'm saying that here at this, what I see is him retweeting is an affirmation that he agrees with the findings that were presented at the point that there was a correction made that basically deflected away from him. It doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't him. It's saying that according to this one article that we see, which is a CoinDesk article, that the wallet was not actually his. The timing feels like a Chewbacca to deflect because it was confirmed money was sent from his wallet to other entities. The real question is not necessarily whether or not this wallet is his or not. The real question is, what about the money he did send that was confirmed, that did come from him to other sources that might have been done improperly, and about the changes in the businesses that he initiated shortly before the collapse. Well, in Korea, again, South Korea, they came up with this shell company called Flexi. And apparently, they've made an association and they appear to have enough evidence to say this, Do Rug Pull basically has worked with, he's worked with this quote shell company. And for those that don't know, shell company idea is it only exists on paper. It's not a real firm, and it's usually used when you want to launder money. So they believe, working with South Korea, working with the United States, they believe that this shell company was a way for him to launder money kind of hidden under the hood. To kind of give you an analogy, right? If somebody had a business and then they had some other business that was owned by a friend for Joe's Food Shack, and you had monthly payments to Joe's Food Shack, but none of your employees got any food, at some point that's going to look kind of suspicious, which is why accounting has the standards that they do to verify what was the intent of these payments, what was the use of these payments, what came of the payments, what's it being used for. So this development says, well, wait a minute, we find this shell, we believe that the shell is associated to Do Rug Pull, we believe he was using it to launder funds. TFL at this point was owned by Do Rug Pull as a different organization. TFL basically left South Korea in April before the crash. TFL still exists as an entity, but not in South Korea as a formed entity. Now it starts to get a little bit shadier because, okay, the thought was he only had one company that he was either in ownership or had a majority stake ownership of, which was TFL. Now this other one's coming to surface, and there's the belief that he owns this and he was using this shell company to basically siphon funds from the Terra ecosystem into his accounts. So think of it as I use this shell. I basically am issuing payments from Terra into this shell account, and then this account pays accounts owned by Do Rug Pull or people he's associated with. This company apparently still exists. And so all they see, though, is there's a document. They don't see there's a physical space. They don't see any sort of physical presence or premise as it is. They don't see employees. They don't see anything else. All they see is that money, they got money from Terra. They see that. They see there were token sales. They see there was conversion of the tokens to cash. They see that there are other accounts with other corporations that are also kind of suspect. This is a developing story. What brokered this and what brought this to surface was an insider who anonymously came in and said, no, here's what's going on here. I saw this and I see what's happening here, and this is what's going on, which caused them to do more digging. Now, mind you, Do Rug Pull is still on the hook and TFL for fines because of tax evasion, because that's all they could get them for was ducking taxes. But as part of the tax evasion and the fact they haven't paid yet, they're doing more digging because they're going to get as much as they think they can. What I said was, I don't think that they're going to make significantly much of a case because of the fact that it feels like he was very intelligent about covering his tracks. Here's where I think it differs a little bit with these new revelations. Part of what happened with Terra is because it's a largely unregulated space as cryptocurrency, yes, but the thing is, what happens when you have something like this where a significant amount of money is lost due to something else and you can directly associate it to fiat in some way, all of a sudden you start getting into these financial crimes sections of the governments. Because UST was supposed to be pegged to the US dollar in some way, the thought is that financial authorities are going to use that to start launching investigations and launch a case, to the point that South Korea even brought back a crime unit they had turned off to just specifically investigate this, partnered up with the US SEC, and figured out, let's do some analysis. Can we make a case, and there are exemptions in the law, to say, can we make a case that what that he was transacting here fits the definition of a security, which goes to the Howey test? And if it does fit the conversation as this was a security by definition, and the way that they marketed it, the SEC has an exemption where they can start pursuing legal action, similar to the way that they've done for other fiat-based crimes, where they can say, we are fitting this in the category, even though it doesn't really perfectly. it matches all these XYZ. This one's interesting because as UST, just UST, under the Howey test, there's no way it's not a security because of the way it's bought, sold, and traded. It's Luna itself that was a little bit sketchy, but the fact that they associated the two, making one dependent on the other, to me feels like that they would have at least very closely in the gray area spinned over to the securities conversation. If they can make that work, Doe rug pull's not going to get very far because the U.S. is not going to let it go, as we learned with many other of these type of, these entrepreneurs that they think they got something and they're going to go away and hide, and eventually they get caught and they get brought back, extradited, or whatever they need to do with the other governments. The whole situation actually does bring back interesting memories of Kim.com. Kim.com, of course, was behind the mega file sharing, and the United States was so aggressive with this business that they literally partnered up with, in this case, New Zealand, to raid this guy's place, even though they couldn't make a case against him. And that's, as far as I know, it's still ongoing. And Kim.com was one of the first that was trying to decouple in terms of file sharing fairness and being able to trade files and liability for file sharing. All of this reminds me of this. And .com has been in cryptocurrency. He's watched cryptocurrency. He's watched fiat. He's watched all this kind of from a distance where he's at. But it reminds me of that same chase where, again, if he's able to, U.S. and South Korea are able to make that connection, then yes, you are going to see definitely a similar type of, I don't want to say it's a witch hunt, but a similar type of aggressive push to get this guy and bring him to some justice. Whether they're going to be able to pull it off, that's the open question. Because again, the .com chase went on for ages, and I don't know that they ever got it perfectly solved. I think he was able to keep most of his stuff. I don't know that they were ever able to truly enforce anything because they couldn't prove anything. A lot of it was made up, and that might happen here because, again, there is no true eggs around cryptocurrency. So the only avenue they have is around making it declared as a security. Well, that has broad-reaching ramifications. It might even affect the XRP ongoing situation as well. So it's an evolving situation. Suffice to say, Doe rug pull made some critical mistakes, didn't clean his tracks, and he screwed a lot of people. And a lot of people want to see him brought to justice. A lot of people want to see reimbursements hand out. Even with the Bernie Madoff, they were able to pay some of the people back with the money that they lost. So I can tell you that if the U.S. gets involved and they start enforcing, he's not going to get very far because U.S. is not going to give up. And very few countries are going to be wanting protecting him because chances are high-level people in many of those government entities lost a lot of money too. And if that's the case, they're not going to protect him like they might have done somebody else in this situation. So we'll have to watch it, see what happens. He's arrogant, right? He's ego. He was very arrogant that he had it all figured out. And as I've said, when you build a thing, assuming a bull market, and you don't build to assume a bear market, eventually it's going to crap and collapse. That's what we're seeing with a lot of these projects. It's not unique to him. And I want to be clear that that's why smart regulation should have been in place from square one, things where ultimately I'm against algorithmic stablecoins in the first place because it feels like a house of cards. It feels like you're making assumptions that you can't back up because you can't control the larger markets. If we got to a point where we can decouple again, I think it might get a little bit better, but as long as we are tethered to Bitcoin and Bitcoin is held hostage by big players, I don't know that these algorithmics are really the right answer. I understand the value in some cases, but I believe in the whole trustworthy of making sure you got dollars on hand, even through inflation situations, which is the reason why USDC infrequently might lose its peg, but it's like a fraction of a second and it restores because it seems like it's better managed. Because I don't think it's a matter of the token. I think it's a matter of the people and making sure that people are taken care of. Those that trust you with their money, for whatever reason, should be well taken care of. On the flip side, though, I do believe that many of these exchanges and larger companies, like the Stable Gains and others, I do believe that they took this and they pretty much they banked on kind of the FOMO and the hype. And that's scary when you have large businesses that go off the hype and they create this bubble situation. It's very similar to the 2008 housing bubble. Okay, the housing prices are just going up, and then we take home equity loans and treat our homes like an ATM machine. What do you think is going to happen? That's basically what happened here. So let's just see where we go from here. And if the U.S. is able to make this case happen, if anybody's going to be recouped off this, it's going to be years out, I would guess. That's assuming they can track him down and assuming they can get the money in there. Again, he is on social media actively doing things, so he hasn't completely disappeared off the radar. Maybe he's hiding in some country like car salesman, it does, or whatever's going on there. We'll have to wait and see.